Hello everybody and welcome to our latest edition of New Era Moms. Today we're going to talk about punishment versus discipline. So the question would be, what is the difference between punishment and discipline? And I like the question because I get asked it a lot, especially as a parent coach when I go to people's homes. People don't really understand the concept anymore of punishment versus discipline. Discipline to me, without getting too theological, discipline comes from the word disciple, to teach. So when you discipline a child, you're actually explaining to them how they need to act in the world. Whereas when you're punishing a child, you're actually delivering a message that they've been naughty or bad, and that tends to be a little bit more severe. So, for example, with my little boy at the moment, who's 14 months old, some people say, oh, do they understand when you talk about discipline? Well, if I offered him a candy bar, he'd want the candy bar. So they don't get the concept, but they do understand that there's something they have to do. He has a situation at the moment where he keeps going into the kitchen and he bangs this particular cupboard against the dishwasher. So there's a couple of ways to look at that. What's discipline and what's punishment? Discipline for me with him is putting him in time out. Now, I don't actually physically remove him to another room, but I just remove him from the situation. I close the door. I sit him on the floor for really, technically, it should be 2 minutes if I was really following through with timeout. But I sit him on the floor for a little while and explain to him that it's not okay to bang the door. But then I either remove him from the situation or I find something that he can bang. But he's not allowed to bang the door against the dishwasher. So that's my version of, the fact that you have discipline versus punishment. So I'm wondering what you two think about discipline versus punishment.
I actually like what you were saying, Stella. I have the opportunity to have two people in my family that are educators. My sister is one of them, and so when my 8-year-old was a year and a half, she actually taught me the art of diversion, which is very similar to what you just said. If they're banging on the cupboard and you want them to stop, it's so hard for them to understand. So obviously the discipline, I really like what you said about the diverting of attention. So he obviously wants to bang something, so finding him something that he can bang so that he learns what is appropriate and what is not, I think is fantastic. And what I also like about that is that I think that from a very early age, children can learn how to be individuals and how to be independent. I remember my friend coming by when my kids were I don't know, a year and 3 years old, and how they would take their dirty clothes to the hamper. And it wasn't about the kids taking the dirty clothes to the hamper so that I wouldn't have to do it. On the contrary, it's easier for me to do it. But teaching them from a very young age to be responsible and independent. And I think that that's where the discipline, and I love that you said that it comes from the word disciple, because that's what it means. It's being a good disciple. It's teaching them through simple lessons like taking your clothes to the hamper or finding them something else to bang on, so that they learn the appropriate behavior. So I really like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what's great is with discipline, I find that you are walking them through the steps of how to resolve the conflict, versus with punishment, it has a more of authoritative approach. And I know that what we're talking about here is a great way to help the child walk through the steps of how to resolve that conflict, because I am dealing with the repercussions of when, in the beginning, being a first-time mom and parenting and learning as I go, basically. With Xavier, it was a timeout, like this is the time for you to take a break. And a lot of times, too, it was very reactive. If he did something wrong, this is, again, when he was much younger, first, 2 years old, and punishing him, like if it's taking something away from him. And then I started finding that it started to have an effect when he would interact with others. He took a very authoritative approach in dealing with the situation rather than walking through the steps of solving the problem. So then naturally I had to change my approach and how I was teaching him how to resolve the conflict, so that it wasn't so it's all about me or this is what I want, it's because I said so. It's more like, how can we really come together and make this work? So that's what I really like about the discipline approach versus the punishment approach.
Stella, I'm just curious to know if you believe that punishment is important as well, and what you feel that, you know, any advice that you can give us about when, you know, are there parameters when punishment is appropriate? Because I think that I believe there is. So I'm curious to hear what you think.
No, it's a good question. I definitely think that punishment comes more into effect with older children,
Okay.
and I definitely do believe that punishment comes into effect, I think, through anger the majority of time. Like, you know, if you're spanking, it's usually a quick reaction. But I think as they get older and they're sort of really running you ragged, we tend to put punishments in place. Say, for example, you know, you're grounded or you've lost a privilege, but my version of punishment is losing a privilege. It's not actually getting
Taking
spanked
anything away.
or getting yelled at or anybody belittling you. Quick sidebar, but I've just done a consultation with a family, and mum and dad aren't on the same page with regards to discipline, and I find that a lot in all of my consults. You know, it starts with where mum and dad are with their approach. But in this situation, one parent is continually calling the little one bad. You're bad. You know, you're a bad boy. You're bad. My thing is not to focus on that, because then people start living to a label. You know, if your husband, as you know, sort of a bad example, kept coming home and saying, you're really stupid, you'd start questioning if you were really stupid.
Right.
So definitely how we approach things and how we start off. But I do think punishment is effective, but it has to be an effective punishment also. The time has to fit the crime, per se.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like if you say you're grounded for a month, I mean, first of all, you've got to back that up. And secondly, what warranted a behavior to get you to ground your kids for a month? So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to know what, you know, your version of punishment is and what reasoning you have behind it.
I mean, when my kids were younger, I did the timeout thing, and now that they're 6 and 8, I'm kind of over the timeout. And I really have to say that I don't punish my kids a lot because I don't have to. I mean, they're really good kids, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that to give myself a little bit of props and a little bit of kudos, and obviously my fantastic family that supports us, but the fact that I take the time to explain to my kids the consequences for everything. And I think that that's really, you know, I always say it's so much easier to raise a spoiled child. I mean, that's a piece of cake. Give a kid whatever they want, they'll shut up, and you know, you can have a lovely dinner if you give them whatever they want. It's just, it's easier. What's hard is taking the kids out to dinner, teaching them how to sit at a table, how to have conversation, put the electronics away, how to say please and thank you, how to look at somebody in the eye and carry a conversation with an adult. All of that takes so much time and energy. So in the few times that I do find myself disciplining my children, the majority of the time, I feel like we've kind of set the foundation in our home already, where the majority of the time they already recognize, and you already see their eyes kind of drooping because they know what's coming. And my 8-year-old, I know I've talked about my 8-year-old a lot. I mean, he's such a good kid that he'll even tell me, Mommy, I think that you need to take away my electronics for the weekend because really that wasn't a good choice. And then inside of me, I'm dying because I know that that's what's right, but he's being so honest. My little one is a different story. My little one will do the opposite. He'll kind of be like, Mommy, have I told you how beautiful you are? And he's the romantic, and he knows that if he's charming enough, he may get away with it. So I really feel that the discipline in my house is more about conversation. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. I do the screaming. And I'm, you know, again, the daughter of Cubans, where we let that hand of ours slip every once in a while, which I'm not proud of, but it does happen. And again, like you said, Stella, you know, it's horrible, because what we notice when we're punishing our children versus disciplining them is that it's a reaction. We're frustrated, we're impatient, we're reacting in a way, and it's so important to just stop and take that deep breath and go, okay, what is the life lesson what is the teachable life lesson right now? And I think that that's where we kind of have to slow down sometimes, you know.
Is when it comes to discipline, setting it in place, I really encourage families to have house rules, starting when children are young,
Yep.
so that we know there's an expectation of their behaviour, which I think you've already got going on, Lule. The fact that your 8-year-old is coming to you and saying, I don't think I made a good choice, he's already had instilled in him what is a good choice and what's not. So some of this just sort of goes along, it has a knock-on effect. If you have house rules and you have an expectation of a behaviour, then a child is not surprised by the fact that they're being disciplined. But I think discipline and punishment it's like a fine line, even though they're extreme, they get confused.
We actually developed our house rules, Stella, as a family, and they're handwritten on construction paper on my refrigerator door.
That's awesome.
And again, about going back to the choices, and then I'll stop hogging the conversation and let Valeska jump in. But another great thing that I thought was really, really helpful was my kids went to a school where in preschool they would tell the children, that's not a good choice, or do you think that that's a good choice, or that's a bad choice? And I remember when I first heard it, I thought, oh my God, that is so cheesy, that is so ridiculous. And you know, I've had to chew my words, because I really think that has a lot to do with the way that it's just made my disciplining so much easier, because it almost created a conscience in both of my boys, where they can already assess whether the choice is a good one or a bad one, and they know what happens, that there's consequences for either side. So to all the moms out there, it's been something that's very helpful for me in the last 8 years of having my children is, did you think that was a good choice? Did you think that that was a bad choice? And I think that that's something that's scalable from when they're 3 years old to probably, you know, even when they're in their 20s. It's something that, do you agree, Stella, that it's something pretty scalable that you can use?
Absolutely. But I want to bring Valeska in, because we had a situation at her house, which, you know, really reflects on this conversation about, she can explain more about her son and his voice, and how we got him to change his voice and his approach.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You know, I was reflecting this morning about this topic with punishment versus discipline before coming on. And, you know, it's true, when you're first starting out, when they're in their 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, you know, they're being introduced to everything for the first time.
Right.
And understanding what is the good choice and what is the bad choice, and etc. And so I remember, you know, and I feel now it's finally kicking in, where everything has now set in place. And I'm like, okay, what's going to be the next challenge? But, you know, right now, it's like, you know, because you go through your milestones, like, yeah, we cut through that one, and then all of a sudden something else, you get another curveball. So right now, it's really helped a lot with even the reinforcement of martial arts with Xavier too. They pick a word for the month, and if the word is integrity, they have to explain what integrity is, you know, doing the right thing. So whenever he's home, we repeat that. You know, how are you showing me integrity when you say you're going to clean your room after you finish, I don't know, taking a bath, for example, and then I come and you still haven't done, you're not coming through with what you're saying. So holding him accountable to the standards, and going back to establishing the house rules, you know, if you say you're going to do something, you got to come through. And just all that reinforcement, the same way you want me to come through for you when I say I'm going to take you to a play day, I come through for you. So it's only fair that you have to come through for me as well. And just showing that through modeling. And what I wanted to say, that with parenting, the beauty of it is as you're instilling all of these values to your child, it's a very nice reminder how you also have to stick to your guns and making sure you're having that self-control if you expect them to have self-control. So I get where Luli's coming from. We come from a culture that we're very passionate about something, and it can come a little strong. I know my mother-in-law, she's American, so when she saw that side of me, she was like, wow, I'm just not used to that, you know, but I've toned it down. And then in going through the process of, you know, expressing myself, when Xavier starts to really frustrate me, because I'm like, you know, go get it, let's get it done, and very result-oriented, and if it's not happening, you know, learning to have that patience, and you know, patience is practice. So being a mom has really calmed me down, toned me down a lot. And so whenever I would get frustrated, if it's putting the timer on, like, look, Mommy's going to take a 5-minute, 10-minute timeout because you're really frustrating me right now. I really need this time to relax. I remember in the beginning, Xavier was really good at telling me that when he wanted to go take a break and say, Mom, I want to go relax. But, you know, sometimes things work for a while and then it changes. But I know that that was also very helpful for me, is having my own timeouts. And the beauty of when Stella was here, when we were working on a show, Xavier came from school and he was all excited and talking about his day and how it went, etc. And then later on, you know, he started playing in his room. Something didn't pan out the way it was hoping for, so he came back with this whiny voice, like, oh, it's not working. And Stella immediately, you know, just jumped in the conversation and said, that's not the whiny voice you had when you came home from school. And I like the way how she put it in perspective for him, because right then and there, he had this moment of self-reflection, like, yeah, you're right, that's not the voice that I had. But the way that she put it in context for him, he got it in a heartbeat and immediately shifted. And for me, that was really an exciting moment, because I think around that time we were working with that whiny voice for the last 2 or 3 months. It's like this habit. I don't know if they're picking it up from the playground or from being around their friends. They see how they interact or whatnot, whatever it may be. But he started picking up this voice, and it's like, you know, how can we stop that? And then since then, he literally stopped.
Stella's like almost like a magician, right? I mean, like, how cool is that? Like, all she did was say one freaking sentence, right? What would we have said? We would have been like, okay, you're not a girl, or why are you talking like that, or what the heck is wrong with you? And all that Stella did was share one sentence, and boom, the kid caught on. You know, she's so marvelous. I'm so glad you're with us, Stella.
Thank you. Thanks,
It's so
Lula.
true. It's getting them to almost realize, you know, it goes back to the good choice versus bad choice. I mean, getting them to almost reflect and analyze for themselves. I mean, how powerful was that sentence, you know?